Hello and welcome. Before this next Catholic Unscripted video, number 50, I'd just like to do a very brief introduction as to why the three of us are together and what we think we're doing. But to start with the conclusion first, what we'd be very glad for is to have your support. We need support in three areas. We'd be very grateful for your prayers. We're very grateful if you would give some thought to how you might share this video, which means an act of discernment, I think, asking yourself if there are people in your mailing list, your friends, that you think would find this helpful. What we want to do is to grow this ministry, partly because we've discovered that there are a number of people who, in listening to the conversation, find their faith strengthened. Some people come to faith, some people become Catholics, some people come back to the faith. And we're very grateful for the way in which the Holy Spirit uses these videos and for our postbag, which gives us some indication that God is working through them. We're also very grateful for any practical support, and particularly for those who take up one of the forms of membership. So what I'd like you to do, please, is to have a look at the Catholic Unscripted website and look at the details about how you might support us there, and to subscribe there as well as to subscribing to my channel. The three of us have our own channels. We do our own things as well as come together, and I strongly encourage you to follow both Mark and Katherine in the things that they do. But I'm particularly grateful for the way in which together we're able to have some effect on behalf of the Church. We came together about a year and a half ago when there was a crisis in a church in Purley. Some LGBTQ plus groomers set out in a Catholic state school to groom adolescent children by using the Lord's Prayer and by using it to act as a semi-orgasmic same-sex attracted framework for developing alphabet relationships. The school very nearly lost that fight. The governors were divided down the middle, the parents were divided, the teachers went on strike. And the three of us found ourselves involved in different ways in trying to help the school and those responsible for it be faithful to Catholic teaching and Christian principles. As it was, we won that particular battle, partly thanks to the Catholic Herald, and thanks to some very brave parents and governors, and thanks in particular to the Archbishop of Southwark. But it was clear that this was a battle that was going to be fought right the way through our society. And together we organised something called DICE, Defence of the Integrity of Christian Education, and we've been trying to offer consultative services for schools who want some kind of theological, cultural and intellectual input to show that we don't have to, as Catholic educators, simply give way to the noisiest, the loudest and the most pressuring cultural forces, particularly when they're anti-Christian and anti-Catholic. That's been successful to some extent. We've been putting on conferences to help teachers and parents and governors, but we've found that the establishment, let the reader understand, has been less than sympathetic. You won't be surprised perhaps to know that not long after the battle at this school in South London was won, the Catholic Education Service put out an apology to anybody in the alphabet community who was remotely offended by the attempt to keep faith with Catholic and gospel principles. As things are, Catholic Unscripted has a growing ministry and it's reaching out and touching people. And what we're hoping to do is to be inspired, or express the inspiration that we've been given both by St. John Henry Newman with his emphasis on the Christian and Catholic conscience being preeminent in all things, and at the same time Archbishop Fulton Sheen's reminder that Catholic laity might have to find themselves taking the strain to help bishops be bishops and priests be priests. And as it is just at this moment when faithful clergy find it hard and difficult in some circumstances to speak out, the scope for those who have different areas of responsibility, different lines of accountability, to be more vocal in standing up for Jesus, for the tradition, and for faithfulness to the Catholic Church. And that's what the three of us think and believe that we're doing. And we're grateful to those of you who find it helpful and we're grateful to God who uses what we do together to make an impact. We'll be very grateful if you'll be happy to support us in prayer, in subscribing and sharing, and in any practical way you find you're able to. I'm very proud to be part of this group, and I'm very grateful indeed to my friends for the way in which they offer their integrity, their lives, their time, their energy, and their vision. Thank you for your support in any way that comes. We're very grateful, and we know that at the very end, all we can do is try and be accountable to the Lord who loves us, died for us, remakes us, and calls us to be faithful. God bless you and thank you. And I hope you enjoy the conversation and that it can be put to good use to his glory. Bless you.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted, episode 50. I'm Katherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
I'm Gavin Ashenden.
Are you having a nice evening, Mark?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the end of a long weekend of birthday celebrations here in Leigh-on-Sea. So I'm both tired and it's very stormy, very windy and rainy and quite scarily windy, I have to say.
It's Isha, isn't it? Big storm Isha making her way through, I think it is.
Yeah, I was watching the big tankers take refuge in the bays of Western Ireland. I don't know if that was this morning or last night, thinking, there's a big one blowing in. But because we're on the southeast coast, where I am, on the Thames Estuary, I kind of thought we'd be all right because it's a long way away from the west. I thought Gavin would get it worse, to be honest, but it is pretty scary out there.
It's certainly bad. It's bad in Wales,
wind,
but well, thank you for asking. Those charcoal tablets helped greatly. But the lines of the Met Office go up the channel. So Normandy, where I am at the moment, is reasonably safe. It's just quite windy. But you're quite right. Ireland, Wales, and above all Scotland having a hard time.
Today we'll be talking about Russell Brand, who has just released a short video. I think it was called Why I Wear a Cross. And he spoke a bit about why he's wearing a cross and perhaps it looks like he's moving towards Christianity, if not explicitly saying so. And this was after a relatively long video he did with Jonathan Pajot. If anyone knows, if you don't know Jonathan Pajot, he's well worth checking out. And he has a YouTube channel called The Symbolic World. He's an Orthodox Christian. Very, very interesting. And Russell Brand has been speaking with him. Also, Italian bishops who promoted a Vatican official who the Pope sacked after he authored a key document prohibiting same-sex blessings, Archbishop Giacomo Morandi. So we will have something to say about that. And the Pope's comments about hell. But perhaps we'll start with Brand. Russell Brand, Why I Wear a Cross. I think you sent it over to us to have a look, Mark. What did you think?
Oh, did I? Oh, yeah, I think I did. Well, I thought it was quite. I think it's quite beautiful. And like, because we know what I love about it is that Russell Brand is a massive sinner. Like, publicly, I'm not sort of exposed to anything that no one doesn't know about him. There's been like documentaries on it and stuff like that, and he's like recordings of him saying seriously problematic things. But that makes it all the more beautiful. It's all the more happy when someone like that suddenly wakes up to the what's going on in their lives and the power of Christianity, the power of Christ to change us, to move us, to connect us with our true destiny, which is heaven. And that, to hear him talking about it, he's not that, I wouldn't say he's not necessarily there yet, but little steps, and that's really exciting, and for someone so in the public eye, it's beautiful and wonderful and powerful to see that, and to hear his explanation of what I particularly liked was the way that he said, well, and I liked it not because it's a good thing, but because it's probably we could all identify with his experience, which was that when he was a young man, and I thought now, so he grew up in Grays in Essex, which is sort of about 10 miles up the road from me, or 20 miles up the road from me. And where I used to work, my first job was in Grays. So like I kind of know the area really well, but I'm trying to think of where he went to school, and I'm not sure that it was a Catholic boys' school. So I know there's a Catholic girls' school there, but I don't think there's a Catholic boys' school. So I'm not sure that his experience was necessarily a Catholic experience. But the point being that he is very clear that his experience of Christianity when he was growing up was, it was really boring, like didn't really make any sense. And that I really identified.
What was very interesting about what he said was it was either really dull and droll and Latin, and he didn't understand it, and I suppose you might now say very traditional, or it was plinky plonk guitars, piano, which offered nothing. And so carry on, Mark. Yeah, he was talking about those two extremes.
Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting because it really is my experience of the, sort of Catholicism growing up in the 70s. And I couldn't make any sense at all about what relevance it had in my life. And it was all about relevance, really. And when listening to him, I was thinking, does it take an adult mind? Does it take an adult reflection? But then I look at my children, and I'm a dad. I've got a number of children, and they love it. They love their faith, and they love their faith because they've got, I suppose, because they've got me and Lou to explain to them why it's powerful and relevant and important and matters to their lives. We can place that moral drama within whatever's going on in their lives in a really sort of profound way. And
but I think that's relevant. I think that's really important because you and I we're roughly the same age. I'm only a little younger than you, and we were both failed quite badly through the 70s and 80s in the church. And so as young people, I agree with you. Part of you thinks, well, doesn't it require an adult mind, a mature mind to access? But I think where we have been able to make that journey, we then offer something to our children and a witness to our children that we didn't really have. It wasn't, certainly I had a lovely upbringing in the Catholic faith, and my mum was a devout holy woman. She was a great witness in that respect. But as soon as I started to ask questions, there were no answers. So it wasn't reasonable. It was very difficult. But as for Russell Brand, I think what's very interesting about him, and it comes to us, the news, although it's just very embryonic, it comes to us very soon after Shia LaBeouf has been received into the church. Who knows? And you really do get this sense that you can't be deeply happy without ever being deeply unhappy. I think that you really get this sense that actually the culture, the more depraved it is, and these are people who've really plummeted the depths by their own admission of complete indulgence and sexual promiscuity and drugs and all those things that you associate with a just do what you want lifestyle that the culture has offered since, we talked about since we were born, post 1960s. And they've been really in at the deep end, thrown themselves in, and yet they're coming out and saying, I see that there's more, there's a need for more, there's that, it's that restlessness. Our hearts are restless until they find rest in God. And they're able to save. And that's what's beautiful, as you say, is actually they're coming from that place where they can recognize the emptiness of all those choices that they've made that offer nothing, that the world tells us will offer you everything. And so I think their voices then become very powerful to people now who are experiencing that same emptiness in the culture. And to say, well, there's only one answer to that, and we know that answer is Christ and Holy Mother Church. Yes, I thought that was beautiful.
I think Gavin. The thing that I've observed in Russell Brand is the way in which his heart has become softened and opened. And I'm slightly ashamed of myself, because when he played that trick on Manuel and was banned from the BBC for a while, it was a dreadful thing to do. And if people don't remember it, I won't repeat it, because it was just a very horrible persecution of a lovely old man making aspirations about his granddaughter. I couldn't have disliked a person more than I did. And I thought he was a complete, empty, twisted waste of time. And I'm now ashamed of myself, because I can now see that a man who appeared to be that has become something else. And what I saw in that clip we've just seen is a man whose heart was melting almost as you watched, and whose eyes were opening. And I think in response to Mark saying we were all let down in the 1970s, well, we might have been, but we might not have been. The fact is, there are a whole number of components that go into getting a sense of the reality of God. And what I think it told you was what we were like, what our hearts were like. We weren't able to interpret, to understand, to be open to the Mass. I'm always so grateful to be a Catholic, because having discovered the objective miraculousness of the Mass, it's always the same. And if it's not accessible to me, it's me that's changed. The problem is with me, not with the Mass, not even really with the Catholic Church, since there's this wonderful objective radiance in it. But I think too, what I thought I saw was, I think it's further along than you think. I've forgotten the name of the American who wrote the Purpose-Driven Life. But can you remember his name, just for the sake of the record? It's one of Billy Graham's protégés. He's got a huge ministry. And Brandt was saying that he was watching him and listening to him. So it's extraordinary. He's listening to American evangelicals. And the thing that really moved him was that this man was talking about the way in which he'd failed his children. His children were not living the kind of life they should have done as a son of children of the famous pastor. And there was a prayer involved, which Russell prayed himself, which was a very simple prayer, asking Jesus into his heart, and he prayed it. And he prayed it because, as he discussed with Jonathan Pageau said something really quite brave. He said, God wants us to suffer. And all this nonsense that God doesn't want us to suffer, and God is a kind of sugar daddy who's trying to wrap us up, is completely wrong. God needs us to suffer precisely so that the self-reliance that stems from the freedom of will that we've been given can be broken down by suffering. And only as it's broken down do we turn to God. I have no doubt at all that if I hadn't suffered and had a dreadful time, I would be trying to make my merry self-sufficient way on my own terms.
You said that with your Larry Chap thing. Rick Warren was the guy that you're thinking of.
Thank you. It is Rick Warren.
It's true. So, and in fact, suffering is part of the journey of all our lives here on Unscripted, isn't it? Mark has spoken numerous times about his own deep suffering, and Gavin, you too, and myself. And I think it's a bit like our physical muscles. Unless they meet resistance, they don't grow, they don't strengthen, they don't we don't become stronger physically. And I think somehow in this way, unless we really go into the depths of that suffering, and it's interesting that today, of course, we have the readings of Jonah and Nineveh as well, that unless we go deep into that, then I don't think we really can access. I mean, actually, some people will be able to, because it's a bit like you've got the two Marys, Our Lady and Mary of Magdalene, and there are different routes. But for many people, the route is suffering. And so it strengthens us and our courage and our character. Brilliant. Yes. So
and the postscript is that Brand is suffering very badly. He's been through a period of immense public humiliation. He's had his funds cut off. His past has been put before him with excoriating pain. And what we're seeing is a man in the fire of suffering who's turning to Jesus. I'd be very surprised indeed if he doesn't come out as a public Christian really very shortly. The man who wears Jesus around his neck and explains why. And he's talking to people like Pageau, and Pageau did a very good job of trying. What Pageau did, and absolutely brilliantly, and I hope this is what we can do too, it's not just a matter of explaining who Jesus is, which we all should be able to do, and the church is often quite bad at, but it's also explaining who God isn't. And so much of the time, people have ideas of who they think who God is, and he isn't. And when we come to talk about Pope Francis' latest remarks, that it plays into that, because one of the things we have to do is to expose these destructive images of God that people rebel against and quite rightly dislike. So there are two elements in our evangelism. One is explaining who Jesus really is, and the other is explaining the distortions and saying what he's not like.
Yeah, very important. Very good. A few months ago, when the scandal broke about Russell Brand and his alleged crimes against women in the 90s, I wrote a piece for the Catholic Herald, and in fact it was less about Brand but about how he's a victim of this culture of relativity, this dictatorship, as Pope Benedict XVI said, of dictatorship of relativism, and so it seems he's recognizing that that absolute necessity for objective good, objective truth, and can see that. So, well, let's watch this space when it comes to Russell Brand. So on to, well, let's finish with Pope Francis. Why not? Hey, give everyone a treat. Let's move on to the Italian bishops just briefly and say that, and Mark, what's this then? So some Italian bishops have promoted somebody who the Pope had sacked. His name's Archbishop Giacomo Morandi. What does this say? What's happened, and what does this say?
All right, so I pulled up. I thought this was a really good article here by Simon Caldwell, our friend who wrote The Beast of Bethulia Park on there, and he's on the Catholic Herald with us. And basically, like, it was a bit of a scoop, really. I thought it wasn't something that I was expecting, but Archbishop Giacomo Morandi, who was dismissed by the Holy Father after, in 2021, he was the guy who issued the responser to the German bishops who asked, "Can we bless same-sex couples?" And he issued the responser saying negative, and then gave the explanation saying we can't bless sin. And that was the thing that prompted, when Fernandez was put in place, he then said, "Oh, well, we can look at this again because it's not like that response wasn't with the flavour of Francis." That really made me feel like I just couldn't believe that he said that. And I just thought it was such a horrible sentence. And so anyway, he was excoriated really by the Pope, obviously, soon afterwards, and Morandi, and then now we've got all the Fiducia Supplicans nonsense that's come out. But interestingly, what's really interestingly is that he was basically he was elected the new leader of the Bishops' Conference of this key northern region of Italy that centres on the region of Bologna. And that makes him in a key position to take over the Bishops' Conference of Italy. Now, the guy who's currently the current incumbent is this guy, Cardinal Zuppi, who is well known as a progressive. And I have been told confidentially from inside the Vatican that he is heavily papabile. He's heavily tipped to be the next pope, basically, right? This guy. And the Italians, even though they can't bear Pope Francis, and that, that it was, I mean, this is going back probably 12 months, but they were saying, that they would accept Zuppi, even though he's a progressive, because he will be more Catholic. He'd be more in favour of the church than what we've got at the moment. Now, I've got a feeling from what I'm hearing that things have moved on since then, and things have moved further to the right. And now you've got this situation where Zuppi has said that he won't run for the chairman of the Bishops' Conference of Italy, and so it looks like this guy is he's actually going to take over. And that is a massive slap in the face to Francis, who's sort of sacked him, and a big slap in the face for Fiducia Supplicans, like it needs another slap in the face. Like, how many more slaps in the face this ridiculous thing take? It's absolute nonsense. And the sooner, I mean, I put a video early, like this morning or yesterday, where Cardinal Zen has finally spoken out. So he's one of the 5 cardinals who sort of was worried about this question and issued a set of dubia in October last year before the Synod on Synodality broke out. And he's very, he's 92. He's the bishop he was the the Bishop of Hong Kong, and he's retired now, but he's obviously been very engaged very brave in standing up to everything, very engaged in the process with everything that's going on with China, etc., which has given us a window into the workings of the Vatican. Because, if the Vatican was going to do a deal with China, you think the one person they'd speak to was the person who had some experience of it, which was, Cardinal Zen. But he's very carefully waited and listened to everything, and he says in his statement that, he's waited and listened and read everything that's come out of it. And basically, in his statement, he says that what Fernandez has written is heresy, and if he doesn't resign, he needs to be dismissed. I mean, this is utterly unprecedented, and it just makes Fiducia Supplicans look massively, massively ridiculous, especially the fact that Fernandez, unbelievably, is touting the fact that he's got another new document on human dignity coming out. So this couldn't be more. I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yes, it is interesting. Yet again, another slap in the face for Fiducia Supplicans, you say. Well, that's a good thing, because it's being shown up, much like we've said many times, the ambiguity of Pope Francis, and we'll go on to talk about hell in a moment. But the ambiguity then makes way creates the space for the truth to be reasserted, or made clear, and less ambiguous, as it seems to be here with Cardinal Zen. So perhaps I think we might move on, having talked about that, to the Pope's comments on an Italian show last Sunday, I think it was. Pope Francis was interviewed and said, "I like to think hell is empty, and hope it's a reality." And these comments were controversial. Why were they controversial, Gavin?
Well, we try and take great care when we comment on what the Pope has said, because we want to keep the dignity of his office, and the papacy is an enormously important and privileged part of being a Catholic. But equally, one way of trying to respect the papacy is to make a distinction between the papal office itself, and the holder of the office when he slips below or in some distance from what the office requires. And the difficulty with what Pope Francis has been doing throughout his pontificate is he's been engaging in a degree of constant ambiguity. It's done very carefully. He didn't say anything wrong on this interview, but he gave the impression of saying something wrong. So he said, it's not dogma. In other words, I'm not teaching it. Nobody can accuse me of teaching heresy, brackets, close brackets. But I hope that hell is empty. And so he sounds like a nice, jovial, avuncular man, perhaps providing good news to people. They don't have to worry too much about judgment. But the difficulty is that first of all, he's very carefully giving an impression that actually what the church teaches isn't true. What the church teaches is that there is a heaven and a hell, and there is a judgment. And the reason it matters is our two major competitors dismiss the idea of hell completely. So the whole therapeutic notion, God is just a therapist in the sky. He wants you to be happy. Or the Marxists, a progressive left-wing one. There is no heaven and hell. We can build it all here. But as we look at what Our Lady has been saying to the church in order to try and renew it, one of the things she's very clear about, and certainly one of the things that brought me back to an Orthodox faith, is the warning that there really is a place of hell. Now, if you treat this at a superficial level, this just sounds perhaps like trying to threaten people into goodness. But what it actually is it is a guarantor of the dignity of human free choice. People don't go to hell because God sends them there. They go to hell because we send ourselves there. We can't bear God. We've chosen against him so much that our sclerotic will rebels and revolts against him. And to be in his presence is to be in hell. In other words, the existence of hell, theoretically, theologically, is a guarantor of the dignity of human choice. And if we get rid of hell, then we get rid of human choice and the consequences of choice. And in fact, what is the church doing here? What are we bringing the sacraments for? why be a disciple if there's no struggle? And then if hell is empty, it may be empty. Is it empty of people? Well, one hopes so, but it's not empty of fallen angels. And the reason the fallen angels are there is they're the driver behind this metaphysical struggle between good and evil in the universe. You can't get rid of the notion of hell and empty it of human beings and then continue theologically, sacramentally, spiritually, as if nothing had changed. It produces a huge shift. And so when the head of the church says, I'd like to think this shift exists, it's not a matter of no consequence. It's a matter of really quite serious consequence. And unfortunately, and it's very embarrassing then, because we're put in the position where, in order to re-articulate the teaching of Jesus, it makes us look a bit nasty or a bit unpleasant, as if we want there to be a hell. And this, if you like, this way of presenting it, he doesn't want it because he's nice, and therefore anyone who does want it is nasty. Again, wrong foots us and makes the whole task of evangelism much more difficult.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You say makes us look like we want there to be a hell. Of course, it's not you want there to be a hell. It's that it's necessary. Nothing else makes sense, and it as you said, God loves us so much that he gave us the freedom to turn our back on him. And that's love, isn't it? That's why our marital vows cannot be coerced. That's why love always gives freely. But the risk of that freedom is that you will turn away. And that has to be, we have to, we're responsible for that choice. And so I think people have a funny understanding of hell, that God, and I think sometimes people think God punishes you and hates you and wants to send you somewhere because you're so mean and horrible and you behave so badly. Whereas I think it's that understanding, it's very important to understand that it's about our choice. God's love for us is always there. It's the Father, isn't it, of the prodigal son, always waiting in the house. And we go off saying, give me my inheritance, Dad, and go off and, get down with the pigs. And he waits for us. But he doesn't notice in the story, he doesn't come running looking from town to town, but he waits. And as soon as you return, he runs to embrace you. But that's respecting that freedom. So necessarily some people will never choose to I would say, to let God love them. I think it's as much, people say, I couldn't love God, I couldn't be a Christian. And I think it sort of misses the first step, which is you have to let God love you. Yes, you have to worship God and love God, but you have to know God's love. You have to let God love you, and people don't. And we have in Scripture the story of the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man and Lazarus. The rich man goes to dies, and so does the poor man Lazarus. And the rich man, seeing what happens after death, says, "Please let me warn my brothers. What if I went to visit them and said, look, be careful, watch out?" And it's a very tough parable. And he says, no, if they didn't listen to Moses, look, they've got everything. They're not going to believe even if a man rises from the dead before them. And I think that's Christ's own words. So we have to acknowledge that we have this life and this destiny, this purpose to return to God. And now matters. What we do now as humans, this is our time. We can't just live in the hope that, well, it doesn't matter, because also it makes meaningless any of our actions. What if you really believe that everyone's going to heaven anyway? As you say, what's the purpose? It's like having a bunch of school kids, half of them do their homework and works, every night of the week, and the other half do exactly what they want, go out, don't do any work, and they all get 100% on their test. Well, that's not justice, is it? So God is both infinitely merciful and just. And so justice demands that there be a choice to turn away from God and not be with him.
I think the whole justice thing is enormously important. I mean, if we had time, we really ought to give it more examination. But one of the things I'd like to add comes from Russell Brand to try and tie the whole conversation together again at the beginning. Sorry about my clock, it's on the hour. One of the things that Russell Brand is very aware of is he's desperate for transformation. He's tried it, he's gone to the mystical East and he's discovered it doesn't work. But he's sad to say, I need to be transformed. The reason he needs to be transformed is because he's been in hell. You can't imagine, hell is not locked up outside time and space. Both heaven and hell infuse time and space. And we have tastes of heaven and tastes of hell. To deny that hell is real is to deny that what we've tasted here is hell. It's to deny that Russell Brand's experience of despair is real. But precisely that taste of hell is what is driving him to beg for transformation, to beg for heaven now. It's enormously important that we should help people interpret what's going on in life. People experience both heaven and hell now. If we simply rub hell out as if we can be avuncular therapists, we undermine the whole fabric of human experience and the whole purpose in which God's love and the freedom of will, justice and forgiveness are all woven together. You can't get rid of it without the whole thing falling down. Russell is looking for transformation and freedom from hell. It's not right that Pope Francis should remove that because it will impede his journey into the arms of Jesus, forgiveness and heaven.
And it really sells people short. It lets them down. And it's so in keeping with everything that we see around us in the culture at this time. It's all just low expectations. Everything will be all right anyway. Pass the blame to someone else. Don't take responsibility for anything. And by the way, at the end of time, you'll probably get a place in heaven anyway. It's just, it doesn't call them to anything. It doesn't demand anything, and it fails to acknowledge that true happiness is to be found in the way Jesus taught us in Scripture. And actually, when we, the path to hell is to ignore that. And so I think it's anything we say that might say to our young people, there's no hell. Of course, we can have hope that people go to heaven, but we certainly can't say we're all going to go to heaven. Everything's fine. Don't worry, kids. Keep doing what you want. There'll always be some kind of way out of it at the end. Mark, what do you think about the Pope's comments?
I think it's disastrous. I loved listening to both of you there. You've said it exactly right, and I think the best person in my, as I was growing up, who explained it was John Paul II, who gave this wonderful catechesis on sort of heaven and hell, and he said that in a theological sense, hell is something else. It's the ultimate consequence of sin, which turns us against the person who committed it. It's the state of those who definitively reject the Father's mercy, even at the last moments of their life. And I think, as you both articulated beautifully, that has to be an option if we believe in free will. And I think the other thing that I was really impressed with what Gavin was saying there, that because my experience is that we see people in hell, and we're talking about Russell Brand or whatever, I think we see that all the time, in our lives now. You can see the result of the rejection of God and the rejection of the truth and the rejection of beauty, and it wounds you. The result is that it causes physical, existential, it really has an effect on you. And so you can recognise that in people even today, and you can recognise it in people who've been freed from it. And even in the comments we've received on the channel, you can see that people are struggling all the time with those issues. And the reality is that if you can go to Christ, that's what you're freed of. You're freed of all of those things. That is the good news. That's what we're here to sort of proclaim, and that's what it's all about. So if you deny that reality that we all experience, what planet are you on? I just don't understand. It's not appropriate for the Pope to, the fact that he is the Pope means that he can't express a personal opinion that's in contradiction to the reality of the faith. And I think the trouble is that what we see with Pope Francis is constantly that he expresses opinions that are, it's like, as the Pope, I sort of tip my hat to, like dogma or whatever. But the reality is I don't believe in any of that. That's the kind of Pope he is. We've never had a Pope like it in history. It's just extraordinary.
the danger is that he may not believe in the God of the Bible. And I say that because the thing that he did over retranslating the Lord's Prayer, there's this difficult verse, lead us not into temptation. Now, in terms of biblical theology, one of the ways we deal with this is because God is responsible for everything. So if you're going to ask to be spared temptation, then you might as well ask God who's responsible for everything. But Pope Francis retranslated it because his God wouldn't do that. And so he used some other subtle form of words that takes the responsibility away from it. But actually, it's not very much different from Jesus saying, Father, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, yours be done. The phrase, lead us not into temptation, is integral to the spiritual struggle, to the willingness to face up to suffering and difficulty. But as well as we do that, we ask him to lead us through it. We don't ask him to stop it or take it or not let it happen. This is a different kind of God. This is a Father Christmas God. And so if you have Pope Francis saying, giving these heterodox views on hell as he would like it to be, recognizing it's not the church's teaching to stop people saying you're preaching heresy, and then having where does he get the authority to change the words of Jesus in the Lord's Prayer? How is that possible? And what is his view of the Father that leads him to theologically flinch from those words that Jesus gave us? And so this is a difficult Pope to have, and we have to pray for him. But I think, but we have to, with as much love and humility as we can muster, we have to hold him to account, as the Catechism in fact invites lay people to do in certain circumstances.
Yeah, very good. It's true. I think that this Peter Kreeft talks about this. This idea of not talking about God as Father. But actually to use the term father is really important, because what is a father? A kindly uncle, a grandfather might come and slip you a fiver and say, oh, don't worry about doing the chores. But a father is very specific. It's that authority over your child to want what is best for them, to want their good, to bring about their good, to provide the conditions to bring about their good, and to love them, truly love them, and not excuse what they do. So I think it's no coincidence that it also, because it is no coincidence. It's all at once, isn't it? We have this Pope at this time, and we're messed up with our sexuality. A boy doesn't know he's a boy. A girl doesn't know she's a girl. We've lost the boundaries are blurring. And on the one hand, we have this culture where everything's going crumbling, absolutely crumbling. And at the time everything's crumbling, we've got a Pope who appears crumbly, and he's meant to be the rock, or the church is the rock. But then we have Russell Brand, Shia LaBeouf, and at the same time, so it's like this. It's like you said when we went to Chicago, Mark. Of course, where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. It's that. It feels like that on a macro scale, like everything's kind of
more intense.
Crap.
Well, it is. That's brilliant, because it is like that, and I think that's the encouragement that we should give to our audience, is that that they're like, our faith doesn't rely on who is in the Sea of Peter. You have to remember that that's not what this is about. I would highly recommend. So I'm doing a little bit of a Bible. I'm doing a little bit of a book club thing with Professor Janet Smith at the moment, and so I did send it to you guys. I don't know if you saw it, but this is Professor John Rist's done this book on infallibility, integrity, and obedience, and it is really good because it sort of sets it all in the context of where we are in terms of infallibility. So you've always got that. Like if you look at Gaudium et Spes 16 and what Vatican II taught about conscience, and like you've got this sort of contradiction with papal infallibility, where it says that your ability to decide what is right and wrong is based purely on what the Pope says, etc., etc. So, and formed Catholics, those who've studied would say it's about forming your conscience and understanding it in terms of Scripture, etc., etc. So, it's really interesting that all these things, I can't help but feel that God is leading us on a journey. He's leading us on a journey, and we're learning all the time about the dangers of sort of ultramontanism, like we're learning about
Yeah.
Gallicanism, like the things that led us into this sort of precipice that we're in at the moment, where we've given all the authority to one person, and that person, he's teaching he's teaching stuff that's opposed by bishops' like not just individuals, but by whole bishops' conferences, and he doesn't seem to have any humility in the face of that controversy. He just seems to be absolutely, happy to, and like we're talking about the hell thing. To me, that is apocatastasis. That is like which I would say is one of the. I mean, modernism obviously is the big heresy that we're facing in the church. And when I say modernism, what I'm talking about is what you see with Hollerich, Cardinal Hollerich, who was the Rialto of the Synod on Synodality, who basically said that, modern sciences have overtaken the deposit of faith, and we need to forget about the deposit of faith. We need to forget about revelation and what Jesus said. That's outdated now, and we need to go along with, we need to reject these people from the church. That they have got absolutely no business being involved in teaching people, because Jesus came with the truth. We believe that, Jesus is the truth, and the truth will set us free. There's no room for this sort of thing. But even Origin, like apocatastasis and all these sort of things, if you look at what the Eastern Church believes about it, God might bring everything all into. So if you don't know, that basically the idea of Origin was that it would all be brought into God's plan at the end, sort of this thing in St. Paul's writings, etc. But even then, you've got this idea that there are various degrees of heaven, and that, even if we are all saved, that you might be denied the beatific vision, and you might be in one of the lower states of heaven, and so it's basically the same thing, heaven and hell and purgatory, but all done on one level sort of thing, isn't it? So go on, Gavin.
Let's keep the hope. Let's keep the hope up, because here we have Russell Brand becoming a Christian in the most difficult of circumstances. This morning I downloaded a book from Kindle called Coming to Faith Through Dawkins, 12 people, 12 atheists, 12 scientist atheists who came to faith because Richard Dawkins pitched it too hard and hot. And so made them re-examine and then become Christians.
No, you'd never be afraid, Gavin. Do not be afraid. Jesus tells us that.
Thank you, Katherine.
No, the book you're talking about there is brilliantly entitled. I think it's The Dawkins Delusion, isn't it? So where he wrote The God Delusion, it's all these people who have seen through Dawkins and have come to faith. I'd like to finish, perhaps. It's a wonderful passage which I think is from CS Lewis, which speaks to the difference between Christianity and man-made religions, as we're talking about this inability to just speak the truth of, I think we've forgotten really who Christ is, what truth is, as we're fluffing around trying to soften everything. Men are reluctant to pass over from the notion of an abstract deity to the living God. I do not wonder. Here lies the deepest tap of pantheism, and of the objection to traditional imagery. The pantheist's God does nothing, demands nothing. He is there if you wish for him, like a book on a shelf. He will not pursue you. There is no danger that at any time heaven and earth should flee away at his glance. If he were the truth, then we could really say that all the Christian images of kingship were a historical accident, of which our religion ought to be cleansed. It is with a shock that we discover them to be indispensable. You have had a shock like that before, in connection with smaller matters, when the fishing line pulls at your hand, when something breathes beside you in the darkness. So here the shock comes at the precise moment when the thrill of life is communicated to us along the clue we have been following. It is always shocking to meet life where we thought we were alone. Look out, we cry, it's alive. And therefore this is the very point at which so many draw back. I would have done so myself if I could, and proceed no further with Christianity. An impersonal God, well and good. a subjective God of beauty, truth and goodness inside our own heads, better still, a formless life force surging through us, a vast power which we can tap, best of all. But God himself, alive, pulling at the other end of the cord, perhaps approaching at an infinite speed, the hunter, king, husband. That is quite another matter. There comes a moment when the children who have been playing at burglars hush. Suddenly, was that a real footstep in the hall? There comes a moment when people who have been dabbling in religion suddenly draw back. Supposing we really found him, we never meant it to come to that. Worse still, supposing he has found us.
How did you pull that out of the UFO, Gavin? This is supposed to be Catholic unscripted. How did you? We
Katherine,
only decided what we were going to talk about before we laughed.
no, it just occurred to me. It's a passage from Lewis that I've heard many times and I love, and I think I think of that often when I hear a story like Russell Brand's, or when I hear of those people like we talked about who are coming out of the woodwork, who are fed up with the vague spirituality or the ambiguity or the wishy-washy nothingness, and suddenly recognise the true hunter, king, father that is God. And actually, it's frightening, but beautiful.
Will you put it in the show notes, because I think people will want to have access to it again. And I'm not trying to upstage you, but you reminded me of another incredible 10 lines by a woman poet called Annie Dillard. Can I read it? It says it adds to what you've been saying. Of
course, yeah.
So she writes this: on the whole, I don't find Christians outside of the catacombs sufficiently sensible of conditions. Does anyone have the foggiest idea what sort of power we are so blithely invoking? Or, as I suspect, does no one believe a word of it? The churches are children playing on the floor with their chemistry sets, mixing up a batch of TNT to kill a Sunday morning. It's madness to wear ladies' straw hats and wear velvet hats to church. We should all be wearing crash helmets. Ushers should issue life preservers and signal fares. They should lash us to our pews, for the sleeping God may wake someday and take offence, or the waking God may draw us out to where we can never return. It's this sense that people, just as Lewis was saying, I love his image of there's a tug on the line or a breakthrough.
I love that.
But it's the same thing. We're wholly underestimating the reality of God, and when we do, we're completely struck with awe. And the fear is not that he won't love us, because he is love and he made us, but the fear is that our wills become so sclerotically hardened that we somehow won't say sorry or won't choose him over our own self-pleasuring. It's a very dangerous world we live in, morally and spiritually. I mean, thank God he does everything for us, but he requires something from us too.
It's beautiful, and it just makes me think of, like, the fundamental biblical idea of tabin Adonai in Hebrew, fear of the Lord. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs 1:7, and that is it's not just in Proverbs 1:7; it's throughout the Old Testament, isn't it? And that's exactly what all of us are articulated there, which is really powerful, but a difficult concept sometimes.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and it just confirms to me that we are of like mind and heart. I just thought the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and that's something that we need to remember and understand, instead of some of the things that we get today. Wonderful! Oh, how great! We're done. Sorry, I'm trying to think of what else.
Thank you for steering us through. And can I send you that bit and we can put it on the show notes too? Put both Lewis and Annie Dillard there.
Yeah. I'll edit all this. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else, because something came to me. No, I've forgotten. Okay. Oh, yes. Well, I'd quite like to talk about scientism in a bit more depth at some point down the line, and I'm sure many other things. But please, if you're watching and haven't yet looked at our website, please check out catholicunscripted.com. Thank you for all of the support that we've had on the website. There's a blog, so take a look at the blog posts and check out our membership options. And if you can support us in any way, just scroll down and please do so. Also join our mailing list. And if you join our mailing list, we'll be sending newsletters your way. But thank you very much for watching. And if there's anything you'd like to ask, if there's anything you'd like us to discuss, then please email info@catholicunscripted.com, and we'll read all the emails and then plan times when we'll address different topics as they come in. But we have a few from viewers, so please continue to send us emails and let us know what it is that you, because really often we get together in the week and share ideas, but we're very conscious that we want to be as helpful as possible. So we won't always know when you're watching what you would find most helpful. So if there's any areas that you'd like us to discuss, please just let us know.
I was just going to suggest that, just to be pedantic, you might want to say not if there's anything you would like us to do, because some of us have had invitations to become life models for some of our fans, and it just may be, since we've been talking about boundaries.
That was me.
Go on, Mark.
It wasn't me.
Well, thank you for watching. We've got to 50, and please God, we'll get to another 50 with your prayers and your support. Thank you very much. I'm Katherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
I'm Gavin Ashington. Bless you.